Right, Shabbat Shalom. Before we start, we'd just like to open up in prayer. Thank you, Father, for this wonderful time to come together as your body, as your people of Israel. Father, I just ask that you be with us tonight and you reveal your truth to us in a special way. Father, I ask that you be with me so I can only speak what you want me to speak, and that your Spirit reveal your truth and fill those voids and gaps in each and every one of us. I ask it all in the mighty name of Yeshua Mashiach. Amen. Alright, so if anybody has any issues not hearing me, just unmute and let me know. Otherwise, I'll just continue. So, last time I did the Yom Kippur from Brisbane when we visited friends. So I've got a chart in the notes that we're going to look at just as a quick recap. But tonight we want to focus on Yom Kippur. It's a bit late because Yom Kippur was for the Jews 2 days before, and then for other people it was a day before, and for us it was today, which was the fast. So just to recap what the fast is about, and that is found in Leviticus. Now, when I sent out the email, I stumbled upon this word, which is in Leviticus 23, 26, 27, which is the verse that says that you should humble or afflict your soul. And that word affliction or to humble is the word anah, and that's the letters Ayin Nun Hey. Now, Hey means light or revelation, or to switch on the light, and the Nun is referring to fruit, or the fruit of your life. So the light is shining on your fruit, or the things that you do, and then the ayin represents the eye, or the things in the way you see things, or your point of view. So during Yom Kippur, what we do when we afflict our souls, we switch on the light, or do introspection on the way we see things, our point of views, as well as on what we've done and the way we do things, whether that's still way up to Yahweh's standards, because it's all about having a relationship at the end of the day, and we need to assess that on a regular basis, and Yom Kippur is basically what that's about. So there was just something interesting that I saw in the word anah, that means to afflict, and it associates with looking into yourself. Now that word is found in Genesis 8:27 for the first time, where Abraham said, "Behold, I have taken upon me to speak to Yahweh." That word behold is linking to the ayin, which is to see. And then he ends the verse by saying, I am but dust and ashes. So that shows you the form of humility, or the humble attitude on which he approached Yahweh. And that coincides with the meaning of anah, that means to be humble, to be weakened, to deal hardly with, to chasten self, and also to answer to. So that was just something interesting that I saw that's applicable for us during this time. So going back to the topic of Yom Kippur, it's basically about three main themes. Now the first one is about the high priest, the covenant, and presenting the blood to the Father, confirming the covenant and atoning for the people, which is a benefit of the covenant. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it has to do with the sin sacrifice, which is associated with one of the goats, which is for the covering of the sins of the nation. And the third part is the scapegoat, which deals with taking away sin. So it's not only dealing with sin, it's about giving the answer to the solution to the problem, which is sin in itself. So that those three things are evident, and we see the high priest playing a part in it. The blood is the means or the medium through which this is achieved, and then the covenant is associated with the mercy seat on which the blood is sprinkled, which is on the Ark of the Covenant, which contains the tablets, which is symbols for the covenant. So it's all about the covenant and the one doing the work on behalf of the covenant for our benefit. Now, when John the Immerser, or John the Baptist, saw Yeshua, he recorded in John 1:29, "Behold, the Lamb of Elohim who takes away the sin of the world." Now, that doesn't make sense if you think about that the lamb, which is the Passover lamb, was not a sin sacrifice. It was a olah, or an elevation offering, which is a burnt offering. And the lamb did not take away the sin. The lamb actually acted as a covering, which is the theme of Yom Kippur, to cover. And the blood of the lamb covered the people inside the house or inside the household of Yahweh. So that connection was made through John, connecting Yom Kippur and Passover together. So we see that the Passover lamb, which is a sacrifice, together with the sin sacrifice, which is a chatat offering, which is the goat, as well as the azazel, which is the scapegoat, are the three offerings that coincided and was the revelation that John revealed through that passage. So the Lamb of Elohim who takes away the sin is part of the scapegoat, and the sin is associated with the sin sacrifice, and the Passover lamb is the covering, which is also the theme of Yom Kippur. So we see they are intermingled and intertwined, and that is only revealed and confirmed when you put the festivals on the menorah pattern. So I've got number 2, number 6 there. Number 2 is unleavened bread, and number 6 is Yom Kippur, and they are connected in the menorah pattern. But Passover is the day of preparation to access unleavened bread, and the same offering, which is the Passover lamb, is used by unleavened bread. So it's the same connection there. So the lamb of Passover connects to the 2 goats at Yom Kippur. And that connection is basically explaining the whole process. Now, the process got a beginning, which is the first festival, and it's got an end, which is the 7th festival. So the first step to access the process, which are the 7 festivals, or the covenant, or the work that is facilitated by the high priest, is accessed by the first one. So the Passover lamb gives you access to the covenant, because that's what the high priest was associated with, by sprinkling the blood on the mercy seat, which is associated with the Ark of the Covenant and the covenant itself. And then the rest of the festivals are the processes inside the covenant that will lead to the final step, which is number 7, which is Sukkot, which is entering the kingdom. But the one preceding that gives you access to number 7 in the same way number 1 gave you access to number 2. So we see the similar patterns there, and that takes us to last time's menorah pattern, which basically gave us the whole process, which I highlighted. There are 2 keys. The first key is to access the covenant through Passover and unleavened bread, and it takes you through a process called first fruits. First fruits is where new believers come in. They are the first fruits of the work of what happened on Passover. So that's basically what the gospel is all about. It's about bringing new people in and bringing those new believers in, which are the first fruits. And then all of that is to allow them to access the second step, which is the covenant depicted by Shavuot. And Shavuot prepare you to cross over the time frame of the 2 Yoms. Now, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur are depicting the judgment, or the Jordan, which needs to be crossed over. And that can only be done through those 2 keys, accessing the covenant and then the preparation phase that allows you to cross over, and then you have access to the kingdom, which is number 7, depicted by the New Jerusalem. Now, what's interesting here, which I symbolized, is pre the work of Messiah, we had the lamb, the tablets, the 2 goats, and the tabernacle. After the work of the Messiah, We had the fulfillment of Passover, which is Yeshua's death and resurrection. And then after that, it gave us access to the essence of the tablets, which is the Spirit writing the tablets on our hearts. And then the two goats are the sin offering's blood is presented by the high priest. And it's the work of the high priest that atones for us so that we can access the New Jerusalem. So we see that we need all these things, the lamb, the dove, the high priest covering us to access the New Jerusalem. And these are preceding steps signified by the lamb, the tablets, the two goats, and the tabernacle. So those two processes depict the pre and post coming of the Messiah the first time. And these ones, the second row is associated with the second coming of Messiah. So we need everything in the second column to access the New Jerusalem. Now, what prompted this study was I had a discussion with someone and we talked about the end times, and then the question was asked, why is there a difference between verses in Daniel 9 and then 8, 11, and 12, which use different words dealing with what was stopped. Now, Daniel 9 is the one that's the clearest of all. It says that, and he shall confirm the covenant for many, for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice, which is the word sebach, and the oblation, which is mincha, which is also sacrifice, to cease. And the overspreading of the abomination he shall make desolate, even until consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So it mentions two things: something stopped, which is associated with the sacrifice, which is confirmed by those two words, Zebach and Mincha, and then there's the abomination of desolation, which give you the two things that need to happen for this event to be signaled. But when we look at the other verses in Daniel 8, 11, and 12, it doesn't use the word Zebach, and that difference highlighted that there must be something deeper. So the whole study is based upon analyzing why is there a difference and why did Yahweh use one word in one passage, and he basically say the same thing in another passage, but he uses another word. So that's an anomaly that prompts your attention, so you need to dig a bit deeper to find the evidence. So before we go to the second verse in Daniel 8, 11, and 12, in Daniel 9, it used the word Zebach, that is first used in Scripture in Genesis 31:54, where Jacob made a sacrifice unto Yahweh on the mountain prior to meeting with his brother Esau after 20 years. And this links to the time just before Jacob's trouble and the kiss of Esau. And those two terms are associated with the time of the end, which is also referred to as the Great Tribulation. So the whole context of Daniel 9 in relation to the stopping of the sacrifices are in relation to the Great Tribulation, of which is also confirmed in Matthew 24, when they ask Yeshua, when is the time of the end? And then he said, if you see the abomination of desolation set up in a holy place, then you should not look back, run to the mountains, because then the time of the Great Tribulation will start. So basically that gives us the signal and the confirmation of that. So the issue I had with this is that there's two sets of words used and there's a difference. But when you analyze the difference, it gives us a bit more detail in what Yahweh actually wants to tell us. So first of all, what is the abomination of desolation? Now, all of these verses are in relation to the holy place, even the abomination of desolation, which is set up in the holy place. So abomination is the word shikutz. That means an idol, abominable filth, or desolate, detestable thing. And this word is used in Deuteronomy 29:17, referring to idols which were worshipped in Egypt. Now, Egypt is a place of sin and bondage. That's the place that existed prior to the Passover, or the event of the Passover and leaving Egypt. So that depicts your fallen state, which you were bound into sin and bondage. So the idols associated to that is what an abomination is. And Yahweh wants us to remove ourselves from that place where those things are. Desolation is the word shamem, that means to destroy, to lay waste, and to be silenced. And what amazed me is that there's a few positive meanings associated to that as well, that mean to be astonished, amazed, and to be awestruck. But in the sense of something terrible happening, you can also be amazed and awestruck. For example, a big earthquake or a meteor falling or a massive tsunami, you will be astonished and amazed by the power of nature if you see those things, but they destroy and they lay waste anything in their path. So in that context, that's what the desolation refers to. It's something so supernatural, so great that is happening, but it leaves a trail of destruction as a result of that. Now, where this word is first used is in the context of Leviticus 26. I use the concept of looking at the whole chapter because it gives the first bit of this Leviticus 26 in a positive sense, where it explains the benefits of the covenant. Now, this is where Yahweh proclaimed himself as the God of Israel. He placed his tabernacle or his presence among his people, but then he gave them a warning. Now, the warning was in relation to these idols and abominable things that they should not be associated with, and also to remind them to keep the Sabbaths and to do his commandments. And if they do not do that, then he will turn his face against them and he will release a curse, or the consequence of that will be a curse. Now, the curse is described in verse 22 up to 34. Now, just to briefly summarize that, 22 says that the wild beasts shall kill your children, destroy your cattle, and it will also make your highways desolate. 25 says that he will bring the sword against you, and these enemies will take you into captivity, and there will also be pestilence within your camp. 26 says that they will have shortage of bread, that signifies famine. 29 says that they will eat the flesh of their sons and daughters, that's coinciding with 26, that there will be famine and a hard time. 30 and 31 says that you will destroy all their idols and their places of worship, all that false religion that they that was abominable in Yahweh's eyes. And then 34, there will be no planting, no sowing, no harvest, because the land will have its rest. And all those things are basically in the same context of what we can expect during the time of the Great Tribulation, which is basically a curse that will come upon humanity that is linked to this phrase, abomination of desolation. And Yeshua used this in Matthew 24 to signify the start of the time called the Great Tribulation. And we can expect those things listed here in Leviticus 26 to be on the earth during that time. So that's just something interesting to give context of what the abomination of desolation refers to. Now the next section deals with the two witnesses. As I said, something will be stopped and abomination of desolation will be set up, and they are both linked to the holy place. So Daniel 9 and Daniel 12 has the anomaly and the difference within the verses. So Daniel 12 says, verse 11, from the time that the daily, which is the word tamid, is abolished. Now the word sacrifice is in italics, so that means it's inserted and it's applied based on what is in Daniel 9. And then it said the daily will be abolished or stopped, and the abomination that causes desolation is set up. There will be 1,290 days. Then Daniel 12:27 says, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to the sacrifice, which is Zebach, and the offering, which is a mincha, which is also a sacrifice. So those definitely point to a sacrifice. And then it says, and on the wing of abominations shall be the one who makes desolate, which give you the same Hebrew poetry or the same themes, linking those two passages together. Then later on in Matthew 24:15, Yeshua referred to the prophecy in Daniel, which probably referred to chapter 8, 9, 12, and 11. That refers to all of that. I think I've got a title where it's not. It's Daniel 9, verse 27, and Daniel 12, verse 11. Yeah. The second one is Daniel 9, verse 27, not Daniel 12, 27. All right, so the end will start with the time of the beginning of the Great Tribulation. So the Great Tribulation is the start of the time of the end, and that will be signified by these two things. So what we want to look at now is what is alluded to the word tamid, that says daily and then a space. So it can be a daily sacrifice. It can be something else that is done on a daily basis that will be stopped. So we're going to look at what tamid refers to. So what is stopped? Just to give a bit of background on why we want to analyze this is because of the fact that Hebrew poetry is where thoughts rhyme, and these two verses definitely rhyme because they got the same symbolism, more or less the same theme and message, but they use different words. Now, if you are a medical doctor and you look at an x-ray of a perfect shoulder, in the case of Daniel 9:27, which referred to daily sacrifice, which is Ebach, so you know exactly what he refers to. But then you see in Daniel 12, it talks about daily ... which can be anything. So there's an anomaly, so there's difference between the two images, so that will draw the doctor's attention to see what is wrong. So in our case, that will draw our attention to see what is different, and then we'll analyze the difference and come up and reveal the gems that are underneath the surface within the Hebrew language. So let's start by doing that. So just in summary, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what I discovered before I dig into each one of them. So there are basically four things that will be stopped that's associated with the word tamid. Now, the first one is the showbread will be taken away, the menorah, the high priest breastplate that is on his heart, and the fourth one is the high priest plate that is on his forehead. Now, those four things are associated with the word tamid that will be stopped during the time of the starting of the Great Tribulation. Now, all these four items are associated with the holy place as well, just as the abomination of desolation is associated with the holy place. So everything is still interweaved and linked perfectly together, and they harmonize the same theme and topic. And overlaying all of that, we are in the backdrop and the main theme of Yom Kippur, because that's where we want to look at, because it talks about the prophetic significance of Yom Kippur, that is about the end times, and we want to know when is the time of the end starting, the same question that the disciples asked Yeshua. So let's see what is going to be stopped. So the first one is found in Exodus 25:30, where tamid is used in relation to the holy place. And it says that the showbread needs to be set up before Yahweh always. And that word always is the word tamid. Now, if you look at the symbolism of showbread, it gives us insight on what is going to be stopped or what the enemy wants to stop. Now, showbread, if you look at the holy place, first of all, the holy place in the tabernacle pattern depicts the area where you have a relationship with Yahweh. That's the place where only one person went in, one of the priests, and they need to maintain the wicks of the menorah and also change out the bread to make sure that the bread is always fresh. So it's about the work that is done within the holy place to sustain that intimate relationship you have with Yahweh, depicted by the symbolism of the showbread and the menorah. Now, bread is in other scriptures referred to as the bread of life, which is also referred to as the word of Yahweh. And it also prophetically points to the one who provides the life-giving bread or the life-giving message, which is Yeshua the Messiah, as well as those anointed to teach and proclaim his word continually. So what the enemy wants to do is to stop the message and the truth of the word being stopped. So that is the challenge that will happen at the start of this time called the Great Tribulation. The enemy will definitely start to zoom into those people who are doing just that. Now, just going back into history, we saw that in 168 BC, that this prophecy was actually fulfilled that was mentioned in Daniel, where Antiochus Epiphanes stopped the daily sacrifices, and he set up an image of Zeus in the holy place. So this event already happened, and it's a foreshadow of what is to come, where the same things that he did to the temple, he will do to Yahweh's people, because we are his living temple represented by the assembly. So we will go through the same challenges as what the same spirit applied to back in the time of 168 BC. So Antiochus Epiphanes is a picture of the anti-Messiah, because that's also the time of the Great Tribulation when the anti-Messiah will start his reign. And he is the enemy or the opposing force that will want to stop the word of Yahweh to be proclaimed continually. The second place where Tamid is used is in Exodus 27, verse 20, where it talks about yet again the holy place, but in the context of the menorah, where it says the menorah had to burn always, which is Tamid. And prior to that, it says that the children of Israel had to crush olives in order to provide the fuel that will help the menorah to burn always. So there's some action required by the children of Israel in order to provide oil for the lamp. And that links perfectly back to what we read about in Matthew 25, where we had 10 virgins, 5 had oil, 5 did not. So those who do not have oil in their lamps did not go through the process of the work that is required within their relationship with Yahweh, which has to do with the crushing of the olives in order to provide the fuel. So what does that signify? Now the menorah, first of all, signify the work of the Spirit that he does inside of us. And if we partake in that process, he's doing that work within us, and all the changes that is happening within us will then be part of that crushing of the olive. And that crushing process is also a refinement process that happens within each and every one of us. So it's all about that preparation phase, which is one of the second keys that we need to prepare, that we looked at on that menorah pattern during the Feast of Yom Teruah teaching. Now the third one where we find Tamid is in Exodus 28:29, which is in the context of the holy place again, where the high priest Aaron shall bear the names of the children of Israel on his heart in a breastplate of judgment. And he went into the holy place for a memorial before Yahweh continually. So now we see the link between the high priest, the holy place, and going into the presence of Yahweh. So that now alludes to entering into the Holy of Holies, presenting his people. And the breastplate of judgment is written in the context of being a covering, because if you need to go into the presence of Yahweh, you need some sort of a covering, and that breastplate of judgment was upon his heart, which shows that that covering is done through a motive of love, and it's associated with judgment, and that highlight the fact that he is now releasing the grace which sit within the benefits of the covenant towards those whose names are within the breastplate of the high priest. Now the names are basically the names of the 12 tribes. So that alludes to the fact that we need to be part of the children of Israel in order to be covered when we want to enter into the presence of the Father and not being judged based on our unholy state. So the high priest does the work, presenting us and covering us and allowing us to enter into the presence of the Father. But we need to be part of one of those 12 stones or one of those 12 tribes in order to receive that covering. And that's where the covenant comes into. The covenant was made with Abraham, and it went throughout the generations to eventually Jacob, and his name was changed to Israel. And all the nations have the ability to be grafted into Israel. And if you are in Israel, that means that you have now access to the benefits of the covenant, and also in this context, the covering of the breastplate of judgment, which is on the heart of the high priest, which perform the covering, which is also in line with the theme of Yom Kippur, which is about the covering and during the time of judgment. So what does the enemy want to do? The enemy wants to stop us from entering into Israel, from entering into the household of Elohim, and that he does through false teaching and religion, speaking against becoming part of Israel, because becoming part of Israel is associated with the covenant as well as the festivals, and that is part of the second key preparation process, which is part of the bride's preparation before she can enter into the presence of the Father, depicted by the seventh festival. So all of that is still associated with Yom Kippur, the holy place, and also something that can be stopped. So the next one, this slide is just continuing on that same theme, just looking at the word memorial, because it says that the breastplate of judgment will be a memorial continually before Yahweh. So I wanted to know, what does memorial mean? Because it must mean something significant. Now, memorial is the word sikron, that means remembrance. It's first found in Scripture in Exodus 12:14, where it actually introduces the concept of the Moedim, specifically the first one, and it's in the time frame where Yahweh introduced the Passover, and he commanded Israel to keep the Passover as a memorial forever. So as I said earlier, that is the first step, or the first key that allows you into the covenant. And now we have access to the benefits of the covenant. And what we just looked at is the benefit is the covering which the high priest provide, so that we can enter into the presence. So this is perfectly in line with the whole process of what we need to go through to eventually enter into the presence of the Father. The next one is continuing on the breastplate of judgment, and I wanted to know what judgment means in relation to this, because why is the breastplate linked to the word judgment? I've never heard that before. I thought the breastplate was like jewelry, it's not associated with something that's negative or bad, because judgment is not something that is got a positive connotation in relation to the end times. So judgment is the word mishpat, that means ordinance, judgment, and sentence. It's first used in Scripture in Genesis 18 verse 19, where Yahweh chose Abraham because he knew that Abraham and his children will keep his ways and his judgments. And this was the verse just prior to him having a conversation with Abraham regarding judging Sodom and Gomorrah. So yet again we see the backdrop and the theme of the end times and judgment, but there's someone who interceded on behalf of those in Sodom and Gomorrah. So in this case, because the breastplate of judgment is associated with the high priest, we can see the link between Abraham fulfilling the function of this high priest that present the grace or the covering that exists as a benefit of the covenant. And we know that the covenant started with Abraham. So Abraham is a picture of a high priest or an advocate, that plead the case of those who are still in sin and bondage. So we see that whole beautiful picture, which is also prophetic of the work of Messiah, who is our high priest as well. So what does the enemy want to stop in regarding this? He wants to stop the work of the high priest or the work of the advocate in relation to misrepresenting the work of Messiah or watering it down, saying that the Messiah is not Elohim, he is only a man. So that is what the enemy wants to do through false religion. The fourth one where the word Tamid is found is in Exodus 28:38, and this is in relation to the high priest and the golden plate on his forehead. Now this one really, let me think about this for about 2 days straight, because on this plate was written the words holiness unto Yahweh. Now I thought, does Yahweh need holiness, or is this just reflecting back on who he is? Is this something to do with his character, and that the high priest had to have that on his forehead to have a similar representation of his character that will allow him into Yahweh's presence? And I think that's where the whole theme basically led to. So this golden plate was on his mitre or his hat or whatever you call it, and it had to be always upon his forehead, bearing the iniquities of the holy things. And that's another thing I had to think about for a while. What does the iniquities of the holy things mean? Now if you think about holy things, it's definitely the holy things of Yahweh, because it's in relation to the high priest entering into the presence of a holy God. Now, if he bears the iniquities of the holy things, it means that he is covering for the things that are done that will defile his holy things. And that is what the iniquity is all about. So it's yet again about covering, but in relation to things we do religiously that will defile his holy things. Either we do not know any better, or we are entrapped into following a false teacher, a false prophet, or following a false religion. So to nut this out a bit more, I looked at the word holiness, because what fascinated me is that Yahweh's character is built around holiness. In order to know him better, it will be good to see what Kodesh or holiness actually means. So Kodesh is the word for holiness, and it's used for the first 3 times in Scripture. In Exodus 3:5, where it talks about holy ground in relation to Moses and the burning bush. Then the second one is Exodus 12:16, which is a holy convocation, which is a time when they assembled in relation to the first day of unleavened bread, which is in context of the first festival that will give you access to the covenant. And the third one is Exodus 15:11, where it's in the context of the Song of Moses, singing about the glorious holiness of Yahweh in relation to other gods. So these 3 basically highlight the 3 themes. The first one is a place. Holy ground is a place. That's also associated with the temple and also New Jerusalem, which is a physical location. The second one is a holy convocation, or a time of assembly, which is the first day of unleavened bread. So it talks about a time which links to the Sabbath and the Moedim. So there's a holy place, there's a holy time. And the third one is Yahweh's glorious holiness, which is a holy person. So we see those 3 things associated with holiness or Kodesh. And that gives us a bit more an idea of what is important to Yahweh. It's definitely that he wants a place so we can actually meet with him in a certain space. The next one is that we need to meet with him in that space, but also on a certain time. And the third one emphasizes his presence, that will be present in that place on that time. And that's basically why the Moedim are so special. And we sometimes don't realize it. Because if you are in sync with his appointed times and you assemble together in a place, that's where He will experience His presence, and He will reveal Himself in a special way regarding the theme of that Moedim, or the Sabbath. So that is highlighting a bit more regarding that. So what does the enemy want to stop in relation to this holiness? So first of all, we need to have holiness similar to what the high priest is showing us as an example. You need to have the symbolism of holiness on your forehead, which relates to your thinking and also influence the way you act. So holiness is underlined that we need to think holy things, holy thoughts, and act in a holy way. So the enemy's plan to stop that is to stop us from wanting to become holy, or the importance of why we should become holy. And the reason behind that is that he knows that if we don't do that, we will never enter into the presence or the fullness of relationship with Him. It's all about the relationship once again. Now, looking at the word Kodesh, just on a bit of a deeper level, you look at the root word for Kodesh, which is the word Kadash. That means to consecrate, to sanctify, to prepare, to dedicate, to be hallowed, to be sanctified, and to be separate. So it's basically just adding the verb or the action that will lead to an object, a place, or a person that will become holy as a result of this action. Now, where the word Kadash is found is in the following passages. The first one is Genesis 2:3, and that is where Yahweh sanctified the seventh day, which is time. Going to the last one, Exodus 28, these two are linked, is where man has to sanctify the Sabbath during the time of assembly. So we see the two are linked, but there's a lesson in that. It means that Yahweh set apart a certain day, which include the festivals, and He sanctified it. So He added energy or work in order to make that time holy. But we can undo that by making it profane. But the commandment is that we should sanctify it, and if you do not follow the commandment, you will make it profane and take away its holiness that Yahweh gave it. So the enemy wants us to defile Yahweh's holy things. And that's what I want to emphasize by looking at this deeper level. Which are the things He wants us to defile, or that He wants us not to become holy. The second one is, or the third one is Exodus 13 verse 2, where man had to sanctify the firstborn, or the first fruits, which is part of his household or part of his animals. And that is, on a spiritual level, the people that are in connection with you, that just come to faith, they are basically your firstborn, and you need to help to sanctify them. So it's not about your salvation, it's about the salvation of others, and to help others to become holy as well. Exodus 19 verse 14, the people to be sanctified by washing themselves. That's prior to receiving the Ten Commandments. And this is where the person is sanctified again. And here we see that we are set apart unto Yahweh, but we need to maintain that state of holiness by working with Him, driving or striving towards holiness ourselves. By cleansing ourselves, in the context of washing, is in relation to His Word. Exodus 19:22, the priests had to sanctify themselves to come near to Yahweh. So that is the next level of relationship, which is depicted by the holy place. So when you just come to faith, you've got a certain level of holiness as you cleanse yourself. And in order to have a deeper relationship, there's a next level of holiness that you need to engage with, which will normally mean that you need to engage into the Sabbath, the Moedim, and into studying His Word a bit more and applying that to your life. The last one is Exodus 19:23, where He sanctified the mountain, which is a place again. The mountain signify a higher place or an elevated state. So we need to become holy so that we can be elevated And the mountain is also the symbolism used in Jerusalem, which is the place where Yahweh will be. But we need to be elevated to that level, and it asks us to become holy in order to aspire to that level. So the enemy wants to stop us from hallowing or making Yahweh's things holy. And that's what we can learn from two words, Kodesh and Kadash. Continuing with number 4, which is about the plate on the forehead, which fascinated me for a while. As you can see, I've spent a fair bit of time on it, is the verse in Exodus 15, verse 11, which really drew my attention to it, because it's about Yahweh's character. It talks about Yahweh's glorious holiness, and it just places it on a high level, and it's something of glory, it's something of weight, something of substance, and it basically underlines the fact that Yahweh's holiness is the highest form of holiness that exists, and there's no one or no one else or no other God or power whose holiness is as glorious as his. And that triggered my mind to what Paul wrote in Ephesians 1 verse 20, which has the similar symbolism, where Paul said he exerted in Messiah when he raised him from the dead and seated him at the right hand in the heavenly realms, far above all rule, all authority, power, and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in the one to come. And Yahweh put everything under his feet and made him head over everything for the assembly. So this means that the pinnacle of his glorious holiness is depicted by the symbolism of the high priest with the plate on his forehead, which emphasizes the glorious holiness of Yahweh. And that glorious holiness is passed on to the Messiah when he was risen from the dead, after he completed his work, that will allow us to access that same level of holiness that will enable us to be unified with the Father, just as he is unified with the Father. And that's the whole symbolism around that verse. Now, glorious is the word that really fascinated me, because it's the word adar that's only found 3 times in Scripture. So that means it's a very special word and specialized word describing specific things. The first one is in Exodus 15 verse 6. Let's talk about Yahweh's right hand that became glorious in power, dashing his enemies. So it's again in relation to the verse in Exodus 15 in the Song of Moses, comparing Yahweh's holiness to other gods, and his is superior. But in this sense, it now links it to his glorious power, and specifically his right hand, which is symbolism for the Messiah, Yeshua. The next one is in Exodus 15:11, which is what we looked at now, is the Yahweh's glorious holiness. The last one is in Isaiah 42 verse 1, where it says that Yahweh is pleased with his righteousness, and he will magnify his Torah and make it glorious. Now this verse just sounds so perfect in describing that his Torah is magnified or elevated to a state of glory similar to his glory describing his character, as well as his glory describing his strength. In that we can say that his Torah, and applying his Torah to your life, will give you access to elevate yourself through the help of the Spirit to the level of holiness where you can interact with his glorious holiness and connect with him, and also will give you the glorious power against the enemy. So when the enemy come against us during this time of the end, which is the time of Great Tribulation, we've got his sword, which is his Torah, that has got the glorious power that will eliminate any enemy. There's no enemy, no power, no dominion or authority that will stand against his Torah. And he is pleased with his righteousness. And that's the connection with the high priest, because it's the high priest or the advocate that made us righteous through his work, and he's well pleased with that. And that links back into Ephesians, referring to Yeshua's being risen from the dead, completing that work of righteousness, which we now have access through, following our high priest and being under his covering. I think, no, we're still continuing with number 4. The inscription on the high priest's forehead has got symbolism that link to other passages. First of all, there's a positive connotation as well as a negative one. The positive one is found in Revelation 19, verse 11 to 13, where it says, Then I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse, and its rider was called Faithful and True. With righteousness he judges and wages war. He has eyes like blazing fire, and many royal crowns on his head. He has a name written on him that only he himself knows. He is dressed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is the word of Yahweh. So this is a description of Yeshua the Messiah in the context of the second coming, where he will judges and wages war against his enemy as the right hand with glorious power. We also see that he's got a name that only himself knows. Now, if you know the concept of a name, it's your character, and Yahweh's character is captured in his word, and that's why his name is also the word of Yahweh. And the name that only he knows is the name that we will only know if we know his word, because that is all linked back to his character and his Torah. So that's the positive. So the followers of Messiah Yeshua, who's got the name, who's the word of Yahweh, will also receive his name on their foreheads. And that's recorded in Revelation 22:4. And that links back to Deuteronomy 6 verse 8, which says that we need to have his word between our frontlets of our eyes, just like the high priest had displayed on his forehead, and that will also influence our actions through the decisions we make, which is the sign on our right hand as well. Now that's the positive. On the negative, we see the same symbolism of a name or a sign or a symbol on the forehead, and that's found in Revelation 17 verse 5, which talk about the inscription on the forehead of the system of Babylon, which is the whore of Babylon, and she's got the inscription on her name, on her forehead, explaining exactly who she is. And that's basically the system, or the religious system, that is opposing Yahweh's holy things, which is packaged up in different forms of religion, specifically flagged under Judaism as well as Christianity and everything in between. So there's a sweet spot in the middle where there's a balanced truth, which is what Yahweh wants us to follow. But then you get the extremes on the left and on the right, which is super Christianity on the right, which is very liberal. They don't read the word, they only trust the Spirit, and they levitate and do all sorts of spiritual things. Only joking there. And then on the far right, you get very ultra-religious, legalistic people who adhere not only to the Torah, but also the man-made laws of men and all the traditions of men. And then also same symbolism that supports the system of Babylon is, of course, the anti-Messiah and his mark, which is called the mark of the beast, recorded in Revelation 13:6 and 14:9, which is the sign that will be given on the foreheads of those who are his followers. And there's a lot of people who will take his mark and they will submit under his system. And just for interest's sake, the mark of the beast is depicted by 3 numbers, which is 666. And number 6 is the letter Vav. The letter Vav also means man. So it's emphasizing man 3 times. In contrast to Isaiah 6 verse 3 and Revelation 4 verse 8, which emphasize Yahweh's holiness 3 times, where they call out holy, holy, holy. And the mark of the beast call out man, man, man. And also, it's the mark of the beast is in relation to buying and selling. So it is in connection or relation to money. And there's a song that people like to sing, money, money, money. I think it's Abu song sang that song. So it's all about making decisions. That's the mark on the forehead, in relation to elevating man, or in relation to following money or chasing after money, and that will give you that mark. Now, to confirm that, there's a passage in Ezekiel 4 verse 9, which says basically how the righteous will receive this mark on their foreheads. It says, Yahweh said to him, go forth in the midst of the city, even through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and groan over all the abominations which are being committed in its midst. So that shows you that you will receive the mark of the Messiah or Yeshua if you follow his ways. And those who follow the abominations, and we saw that the abominations are linked to idol worship or things that are not Yahweh's holy things, that relates to religion, they will receive the mark of the one they follow, which is depicted by the mark of the beast. And then the extreme is following money and following man, and in between is all the different sects of religion that dilute the holy things of Yahweh. So in conclusion, what this all means is, in relation to Yom Kippur being prophetic, it reveals to us, let me just get that Nora back, it relates to the time frame which is depicted by the 2 festivals, which start with the word Yom, which depicts a time period or a specific time. And that specific time is also the time of judgment, or the day of Yahweh. And that is the time that's depicted by the Jordan. And the Jordan was the last hurdle to cross over before they accessed the promised land. And the Jordan opened up just like the Red Sea when the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant, when their feet touched the Jordan, it opened up, and then everybody walked through dry land, just like at the Red Sea. So this means that you need to be connected to those who carry the covenant in order not to be affected by the rule and the effects of the abomination of desolation that will take in the space called the holy place that relates to your relationship with Yahweh. So the abomination of desolation is the tool of the enemy to cause people not to have a relationship with him that will lead them or pass them or progress them to the next level, which is the Holy of Holies or the New Jerusalem. So that's very important to know, that we need the high priest and the advocate and those carrying the covenant in order to be walking through dry land, not being affected by it. In saying that, we also need the first key, which is the key that gives us access to the covenant. So when you become born again, you believe in the Messiah, who is the Lamb of Yahweh, and that allows you to access the covenant. Now the covenant take you to the next phase, which is Shavuot, which is the cleansing process for the bride. So we have the 2 things that Yahweh gave us. The first one is the tablets, which is the Torah. Second one is His Spirit that writes the Torah on our hearts. And through that, we prepare and make ourselves holy, wash ourselves, and ultimately prepare as priests so that we can draw near in the holy place and entering into the Holy of Holies under the covering of the high priest's breastplate. So accessing this level of Shavuot also grafts you into the household. Because once you access the covenant, you are grafted into Israel. Now you have the covering of the breastplate, and you also now need the plate with the inscription of holiness on your forehead, and that coincides with the preparation of the washing of the water of the word with the help of the Spirit depicted by the menorah that will prepare you so that you can cross over the Jordan, the time of judgment, into the final place, which is Sukkot or the New Jerusalem. So all of that is signified by what we discussed in the symbolism of Yom Teruah as well as Yom Kippur. And all these festivals are interlinked. It's got a starting point, as I said, which is Passover, the first step and first key, give you access to the covenant. And then the last one, you need the high priest, the advocate, the plate of holiness, as well as your name inscribed into one of the tribes by preparation through accessing the Torah with the help of the Spirit, preparing as the bride, and that will cover you so you can cross over unaffected by the influence and the opposing forces of the enemy that will climax during the time of the Great Tribulation, as depicted by the prophecies in Daniel 8, 9, 11, and 12, as well as Matthew 24. So that basically sums up Yom Kippur in relation to Daniel, as well as in relation to the word Tamid, which are all the things that the enemy want to stop. So it's the spreading of the word that needs to be preached continually. It's a continual process of making you holy through the menorah. He wants us not to be covered, so he teaches that we are not part of Israel. We replace Israel. We are now the church. But unfortunately, entering into the city, there are 12 gates, and each gate has got a name associated with one of the tribes of Israel, and the whole city is built upon the 12 foundation stones, which are similar to the stones in the breastplate of the high priest. So we see the correlation that and evidence that we need to be part of Israel to get the benefits of Israel, and Israel is his covenant people, the righteous people of Elohim, and unless you're part of his people, you cannot access the city that is designed for his people. And then we see we should not fear entering into this time of the Great Tribulation, depicted by the final day, which is Yom Kippur, preceded by the Great Tribulation, because we've got the glorious power of Yeshua that we access through his Torah that is elevated to a glorious state, similar to his glorious holiness, that will give us strength, power against the enemy, as well as help us to become holy, so that we can be elevated to the highest state depicted by the mountain and the New Jerusalem. So I'm now going to conclude with this. So if there's any questions or comments, you're welcome to unmute and ask some questions, and I'm happy to answer that, and we can have a discussion. So are there any questions in Adelaide?
I was just going to say it's really interesting about the breastplate of the priest, high priesthood, the covering, that connection there. That's fascinating.
Yeah. But specifically having the theme or the title called the breastplate of judgment. I never saw that before.
No, that's, yeah, as I said, fascinating.
Yeah. And what's fascinating for me is that all these passages that I looked at either linked to an end time theme, to judgment, or to the holy place, and all the symbolism within the holy place, as well as the high priest. And he never steered away from that theme. And it's all just interweaved and just supporting and harmonizing, confirming each other beautifully.
Yeah, it's amazing that the different parts that it does connect up. Like you said, it just seems unrelated, and then you see the language used, and it just meshes it all together so beautifully. Yeah.
Now, every time I do a study like this, I'm amazed on how it just a simple thing of looking at where the verse is first found in Scripture, or that word, just confirms something within the context that you're busy studying. So, and it just show you that it's a supernatural language written by a supernatural God, revealing hidden things that He wants His people who search the Scripture. He wants us to know those things so we can prepare for what's coming. So, in saying that, I'm prepared for facing whatever's coming in the end, because I know it's not in my power. I'm within the breastplate because I'm grafted into Israel. I'm also on behind the plate of holiness, which the high priest is covering my attempt of becoming holy and keeping his things holy. Even though I fail, he's still covering that. And that still gives me access to the Father and into his presence. Even in my unperfect state, I can still have that through the work of the high priest, which is Yeshua's work, through his spirit as well. You're a bit soft, David, if you can speak up a bit.
Yes. And you correctly linked that with Yeshua sitting at the right hand of Yahweh and Yahweh is connected with Yeshua's so there's a good link there as well.
Yep. Yeah, what's also interesting is the link between Passover, unleavened bread, and Yom Kippur through the menorah pattern. And basically, when Yeshua died, he fulfilled not only the Passover and that sacrifice, he also fulfilled the Yom Kippur sacrifice as well through his work. So basically, all the sacrifices are fulfilled during his first coming. And the second coming, the focus is more on the work of the high priest, no longer the suffering servant, but the one now who facilitate the benefit of the covenant, which is the work of the high priest for our benefit.
So here, I have a question about when you were said on the topic that it is finished. And I have heard this today, somebody say that what he was referring to there was that all the sacrifices and the feasts and everything, that was finished. And yeah, so can you explain that, please?
Just say again, is it what he said, it is finished?
It is finished, yes. And the comment was in reference to what was being finished was the old system was finished, as in the Old Testament system. And I mean, was that related to that, or was it that his work is finished?
Okay, since we're on the topic of something stopped, when you let me just get back to the menorah pattern. When Yeshua did his work, he basically only completed the first two, or fulfilled the first two festivals, which is Passover and unleavened bread. First fruits connects to the next feast and carries the theme of bringing new people in. So that's basically what the gospel message is depicted by first fruits, which connects to the covenant. So the work of Messiah, when he said it is finished, and if people say it finished everything, the fulfillment of Shavuot only happened after Yeshua. So when he died and he said it was finished, it only referred to the completeness of the first work that give you access to the next step, which is Shavuot. So Shavuot was not finished or completed. That was still intact. So when people say, no, when he died, everything was complete, everything was fulfilled. No, it was not. It was only giving access to the covenant, and that refers to nations that now can come in and access the covenant. That work is complete and finished. And the work is basically similar to the theme of Yom Kippur. It's associated with blood that was painted on the doorpost of a house. So that means those inside the household are covered. What we need to do now is leave Egypt and enter into the household of Yahweh, and then we will be covered. So the act is to enter into Israel, or the household of Elohim, which is depicted by Shavuot, which you actually physically apply the covenant to your life in order to prepare for the next step, which is the last step. So, yeah, it is finished. It's just referring to that complete fulfillment of the work that you need to access the covenant, and then the covering that's associated with that. But as I said, to enter into the last, you need all four of those. So you need still the blood covering, and as I said, the blood of the lamb and the blood of the goat together with the Azazel is the complete work of giving that complete covering, and that complete covering is signified by the breastplate and the plate. So we have the sacrifices on the left, which is the lamb and the two goats, but on the right we've got the high priest, and he has a breastplate and a plate on his head, signifying the covering of those sacrifices in him. So that's why we can say that the sacrifices of animals moved to Messiah, because he's carrying the symbolism of the covering on his body through the breastplate and the plate on his forehead, covering all of those aspects. So now we come in under the high priest, signified or symbolized by the priesthood walking, touching the Jordan. It opens up because they are carrying the covenant. In the same way, the high priest is signifying the one carrying the covenant, and if we are in his presence following him, we benefit from all the benefits of the covenant. And that's how we get into the final step, is through the high priest. And the high priest's work is summed up by all the sacrifices done prior to that. But they're all signified through the process of the festivals, which are not all complete or finished yet. So I hope I answered. Any other questions or comments? Eddie, I see you want to ask.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yes. Listen, I got a couple of comments there. It's quite interesting if you look at Noah, when he sent out the white dove, which represents the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
He was our high priest, and also for the redemption and taking us through Jordan. When he went on Mount Ararat, when the ark came to land on ground, isn't that interesting? That's also a symbol of the separation of water for the Jordan.
Yes.
And by coincidence, if I'm not mistaken, they landed on the same day as Sukkot.
Yes, I think I read that, yeah.
So for me, it's like, say, the time shadows is always coming through in a circle, and it's just amazing that it takes us right to the beginning as well. And the moment we live the fact that we don't put the law and also not the Torah on our foreheads, that is the 666 that you explained. A lot of people are looking for a specific microchip or something. It's actually, like you said, it is our belief is the sign of the ends. Those who believe in him, in our front heads, in our frontlets, which is the man version, or is it Yahweh version? Yep. And I'm glad you actually brought it up, because that was very significant to say, because the only reason Noah was saved as well as they were righteous in his eyes. Yep. And they followed his word. Same with Abraham, exactly what you said. And I think for us going forward to the end times that we're moving into, the only sign of separation between the righteous and unrighteous, and sign between where the separation is going to come, is those who actually follow his ways, or those who are following his the man ways, which is also to do with the modern churches these days, to an effect, which is not following that. And that's where Yeshua's grace comes in, I imagine.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. Yeah, all the patterns just continually confirm each other, and all the symbolism just beautifully interweave together to confirm the same truth. Yeah, so salvation, Noah, or actually the ark is the first event that symbolized salvation. And the ark landing on a mountain is signifying the New Jerusalem landing on a mountain. So it's got the same symbolism. And the ark was also like a house, but it just floated on water. So it's also a household that it represented, that the household of Yahweh will be saved and will be elevated, where the others will perish and be separated. Yeah, beautiful picture there.
And I truly believe that the teaching you did on Yom Kippur, as well as just giving me personally as well, and for us that's listening here in Kent's area, it's giving us that hope to understand that it's in Yahweh's hands, and we should not fear.
No
we
fear.
Should not fear at all. Because the priest is in control. He is in total control. Yeah. And we're seeing all the stuff happening in front of us. And I think in Matthew, Yeshua's word said, you will see them fall on your left and your right hand side, but do not fear.
That's it.
Because if you walk in Torah, you'll be fine. I think that for me, and the Day of Atonement this year, that was the theme that was going through my head as well, was do not fear, because we are getting fear-mongered in the society these days to test their own religions. And I think, thanks for this teaching. It's unbelievable as usual. It's just the fact to reinstate that there is been a higher sacrifice for us, and there is been hope through the ages, and the signs and the type of shadows. It just reminds us this happened before. He's got it under control. We should just stay fast and stay in his ways.
Yeah, and also just the fact that one of these verses were from the Song of Moses, and that's a song they sang after salvation, after they defeated, or where Yahweh defeated Pharaoh on their behalf. So the battle was not won by them. They observed and saw the power of the right hand and the glorious power of Elohim at play, and that was a witness to them that they can press through in faith. And our faith is built upon those witnesses, and all those witnesses and events are recorded in the Torah. And that's why it's so important to go through the Torah portion on a yearly basis, so we can have that embedded in ourselves and our children and our children's children, so we will not fear. Just like Abraham was righteous, and he transferred that righteousness to his children, and he taught them and teach them in the ways of Yahweh, and that will eliminate fear completely. And the other verse that says that perfect love drives out fear. That love is basically where the holy place is depicted as your relationship with Him. If you have a love relationship with Yahweh, you will not fear what is outside of the holy place, which is on the outside in the world. We don't care about those things because we've got this relationship where there's peace, where there's comfort, where there's protection. And He proved Himself in the past that He will protect us, He will lead us, He will carry us through these very difficult times. It will not touch us. It will be on the left and on the right. We'll witness it, we'll see it, but we will walk through it through dry land. It will not affect us at all. We just need to cling to those who carry the covenant and cling to the covenant ourselves, which is His Torah, and Revelation through His Spirit, and His holy things. And that's also one thing that stood out for me during the study. What are the holy things of Yahweh? It's everything that He said is holy. We've got the power to keep it holy, and we've got the power to defile it as well. So we need to keep it holy, to maintain its holiness, and having that holiness in our midst is our protection and our power against the enemy and the time to come.
Thank you, Flip. Enjoy that. Can you do me one favor? Can you do a bit of a teaching on H2O, water?
Yeah, we can do that. Do you have one?
Bit of a living water teaching for Sukkot. I've got one. I'll pop it over to you that I did a lot for Sukkot, but I would love to hear your input on one. So I'll send it through to you, mate.
Yeah. That'll be interesting. Yeah. Thanks for that, Eddie.
Okay, buddy. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Just for those in Adelaide, Eddie and Stanley were part of our group in Waiala many moons ago. So,
But here again, with the man and what would be the number for that? Would there be a number for
I can't hear all your question. I hear 666. Can you just talk a bit louder?
you talk about we know that the 666 is the number of the man.
Yeah.
And there's man number 6 is the number of a man, so we get man for 666.
Yep.
And the equivalent to that, God's equivalent to that is holy, holy, holy. So
Yep.
what's the number equivalent to holy, holy, holy? If man, if man is 666, then would there be a numerical equivalent for holy, holy, holy?
Yeah, there will be. If you added the letters for
Would it be 777 or 888 or something similar to that?
Yeah, the letters number 10 means completion, and number 7 depicts perfection. So it's probably 7 because holiness explains Yahweh's perfect state that is undefiled, and there's nothing that can come close to it to even defile it. That's why there's a separation between him and unholy things, to preserve his holiness, so to speak. Yeah, so I think maybe number 7 will be the number that's the closest, depicting the 3 holy, holy, holies. Any other questions or comments? All right, so I think that concludes our study, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sabbath, and I'll be in touch. I don't know if you guys are going to meet for Sukkot, and we're going to have a gathering at some stage. I can see if I can do a teaching maybe during that time as well, maybe on Sukkot. Or I'll just continue with the letter mem, which I haven't finished yet. So I'll keep you guys posted, and if you can keep me posted on your Sukkot festivities, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Thank you very much. We appreciate and love you all. And Shabbat Shalom, Stanley.
That's on Flip. Thanks for everything, eh?
No worries. See ya.
Thank you, Philip. I appreciate the teaching.
Thanks, Michael. All my best to your family.
I'll pass it on. The children are in bed, mostly asleep.
Yeah, you're an expert by now.
So Diana's been listening.
Yeah. All right. See you guys. Be blessed.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom, Tammy. See ya. Bye. Shalom.